Alleged al-Qaeda leaders in Somalia have experienced the full force of US military might in a series of airstrikes in the south of the country. Washington said it carried out the attacks based on credible evidence, but didn't say if it had hit its targets.
Well, one of the men targeted is believed to be on America's most wanted list and linked to the bombings on US embassies in East Africa. But a Somali lawmaker said there were more than 30 civilian casualties. Our correspondent Mohammed Adol reports from Mogadishu.
The United States has continued conducting military operations in Somalia. SC-130 gunships have been carrying out attacks in the southern part of the country, in and around the town of Afmedo, where suspected Al-Qaeda operatives are believed to be hiding.
We did not have coordination with the Americans on the strikes. However, the camp is an old known one. Every time we asked the Islamic courts about it, they denied its existence. We know that the top leaders of the courts met there, and from there were trying to enter into Kenya's borders. The Americans were monitoring them, so U.S. reconnaissance planes came and videotaped them. Then they sent American fighters from Djibouti and struck it from the air.
Somalia's President Abdullahi Yusuf Ahmed approved of the airstrikes and said the United States is well within its rights to do so.
It's my view that the U.S. forces were justified in their attacks. They were targeting known international terrorists. I'm talking of those who participated in the 1998 East Africa bombings and also the hotel in Mombasa, Kenya in 2002. The U.S. has come under attack from these terrorists, even in New York. I strongly feel that it has all the right to defend themselves, and they have my government's approval.
Chief among the terrorist suspects is Fasul Abdullah Mohammed, one of the U.S. government's most wanted terrorist suspects. He is the man thought to have masterminded the embassy attacks in 1998, which left 225 people dead, the majority of them Kenyan citizens. On the streets of the Somali capital, however, reaction to the first wave of airstrikes was mixed.
It seems the warplanes that were used in the bombing were chasing terrorists, and we Somalis have to support the efforts of the government.
Those they are chasing are our brothers, and we say they have to stop bombing them.
I'm really sorry about these American airstrikes, but we will take revenge. All our people must talk to each other and not to foreigners. We do not accept these airstrikes on our land by the Americans and the Ethiopians.
In a sign of the continued escalation of the U.S. military presence around Somalia, the aircraft carrier USS Eisenhower has been diverted from supporting the military campaign in Afghanistan. Navy planes have been conducting reconnaissance missions for the past few days across Somalia airspace. Despite this attack, Washington insists U.S. ground forces will not enter Somalia, but the Bush administration will support what it considers the new legitimate regime. It is the first time in more than a decade that the U.S. government is intervening militarily in Somalia. The airstrikes in southern Somalia have increased the anger many Somalis have against the U.S. government. It has also proved to them that their country is the new front in America's war on terror. Mohammed Ado, Al Jazeera, Mogadishu.
American helicopter gunships, supported by fighter jets, have launched a ferocious assault on one of Baghdad's most notorious neighborhoods.
The U.S. fighter jets centered their airstrikes on Haifa Street, north of the fortified Green Zone. According to Iraq's defense ministry, up to 50 Sunni fighters were killed during the battle and more than 20 others were captured. Haifa Street has long been regarded as a stronghold for Sunni gunmen and Ba'athist supporters. From Baghdad, here's our Iraq correspondent, Hoda Abdelhamid.
U.S. jet fighters and Apache helicopters hovering in the sky, firing missiles at targets. On the ground, a battle raged for hours between the Iraqi army backed by U.S. troops and gunmen. It was on Haifa Street, an area in central Baghdad said to be a Sunni stronghold, a mile away from the Green Zone, which houses the Iraqi government and the U.S. embassy. The area was sealed off, bridges were shut down, Baghdad cut in two for a good part of the morning. The battle on Haifa Street is an example of people's fear. Gunmen fired rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns. A resident reached by phone told us civilians were ordered to evacuate their homes in the morning. He said most left and described the battle as petrifying. The government says it will purge this area and many others of all gunmen, fighters and terrorists.
We're approaching a new plan which we hope, God willing, to be decisive in confronting terrorism. Therefore, all our political, economic, media, security and military resources will be used to support the operations which the capital, Baghdad, is expecting.
And just as the battle in Haifa Street was winding down, 3 huge explosions rocked the capital. Mortars lobbed from across the river to the green zone. A reminder that peace is only elusive in Baghdad. Huda Abdel Hamid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
32 people have been killed in a plane crash 80 miles north of Baghdad. Relatives gathered to grieve for the Turkish construction workers who died in the crash. The cargo plane, which took off from Turkey's Adana airport, is thought to have crashed and caught fire when it tried to land in heavy fog conditions at the US military base at Balad.
A man who allegedly recorded images of Saddam Hussein on a mobile phone before his execution has been arrested. The recording showing the former Iraqi leader being taunted shortly before his death has prompted outrage around the world. The case has now been referred to an Iraqi court.
Protesters and riot police have clashed in Bangladesh for a 3rd day. Demonstrators, angry at the government's refusal to endorse electoral reforms, threw stones and homemade bombs. Riot police used batons and tear gas to disperse the crowds. A 19-party alliance has vowed to boycott the upcoming elections. At least 60 people have been hurt in the recent violence.
One of the Palestinian groups allegedly responsible for the abduction of the Israeli soldier, Corporal Gilad Shalit, last summer, say he's in good health. A spokesman for the Palestinian Resistance Committee said he wouldn't be released until Israel agreed to return 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
The Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, has arrived in Beijing for talks which are expected to focus on China's ties with Iran. China backed a UN Security Council resolution last month sanctioning Iran's trade in nuclear materials. Beijing has come under scrutiny from Israel after allegations that Chinese-made weapons are being used by Islamic fighters against Israeli soldiers.
It's simply not acceptable. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has now weighed in into the energy row between Russia and Belarus as both sides gear up for what could be a lengthy fight.
President Putin has ordered his cabinet to consider a possible reduction in oil output, and that could have serious repercussions not only for Belarus, but also for Germany and much of Eastern Europe. Our correspondent Jonah Hull has the very latest from Moscow.
A tentative start to talks in Moscow. Brief discussions between Russian ministry officials and a delegation from Belarus covered so-called technical issues. Onerous preconditions, according to the Belarusians, applied by Russia to negotiations that will begin on Wednesday. President Putin, meanwhile, weighed in with words of reassurance. It's necessary to continue talks with our Belarusian partners on settling relations connected with oil deliveries to Belarus and with the transit of oil to Western customers, he said. Everything must be done to ensure the interests of our Western customers.
I think there will be a quick resolution to this crisis because there is too much at stake for Russia. Energy supplies to Europe make up the bulk of Russian budget. So I think Russia and Belarus will try to find some sort of a compromise.
With both sides objecting to duties levied by the other, the transit of Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline to Europe has stopped. The cut in supply could affect countries like Germany, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, but not immediately. Strategic stockpiles exist to keep refineries running for several months. The deepening dispute, however, has Europe worried.
It is not acceptable for either supplier or transit countries to take measures that impact on their partners without consultation. And this, of course, is a matter of concern for us.
A more urgent question concerns Russia's reliability as an energy supplier and Europe's growing dependence on Russian energy supplies.